Hi ladies, welcome once again to my channel. So wonderful, and I'm wonderful. So today's tutorial is something that is exciting and easy to make, okay? And it's a circle skirt, a two-tiered circle skirt. It's something that you can make for yourself. Listen, I don't know how the economy is where you are. But if you're feeling what I'm feeling, the heat that is going on around the world, you need to be able to learn how to make something that you can, first of all, that will not take your time, you can quickly make, and then you can sell, that will appeal to different kinds of people. For example, this one, I made it for my friend's daughter, okay, a little girl, but it's an outfit that you can make for mommy and me. If you're a mom here, you can make for yourself, for your daughter, and even show yourself in churches and, you know, different events. And people will definitely say, oh, I want something like this for myself and for my child, or even for ladies and their cousins and their nieces. Listen, it's something that is easy. It's elasticated, so you don't even have to bother about zips and all of that. So I'm going to be showing you how to quickly make this. You just need elastic, and then you need fabric. You can use the same fabric for the two tiers, or you can use different fabrics like you see me here, either color blocking or something that is similar. It's totally fine. Okay, so let's get started. So for our tiered circle skirts, these are the measurements that we'll be needing. You need your waist measurement, you need your hips measurement to measure around your waist, your hips, and you need your skirt length measurement. Now I'm making a circle skirt, tiered circle skirt for a child. So if you're making for yourself, you know that your figures will be higher. So for the skirt length, we'll be needing two skirt lengths because there are two tiers we're making, a step and the first tier and the second tier, or the first step and the second step. Okay, so the second step will be the full length. That's the desired skirt length you want, the total full length. And then the first tier will be the shorter one. So you want to determine how that one will be. For me, typically, I like both of them to look almost equal in length. So I'm going to be, if my full length is, let's say, 20 inches, the first tier would be about 10 inches. You can make yours to be almost the same size, or the first one really small and the second one the full length. Okay, anyone, but mine is typically, I'm using 21 and 11 inches for mine because it's a child I'm making for. Okay, so you have your waist measurement, you have your hips measurement, and then your skirt length, full length, that's the second tier, and the first tier length. Okay, so typically I would say add ½ inch to your length figures, but I like to just take out the ½ inch from the full figure, so you can add yours or factor that in when you're measuring the length. That's for the same allowance. So we'll be folding ½ inch in, ¼ inch twice. Okay, so now that we're done with that, the next thing is for us to calculate these figures. Now, because this is an elasticated tiered circle skirt, meaning the waist will be using elastic, we'll be using our hips to calculate our radius. If you've watched my other wrap circle skirts, you understand the term radius, or if you've been making circle skirts. Okay, so the radius is what, it's a figure that we would need when we are measuring on our fabric, and you'll be seeing that shortly. So instead of using our waist, you use your waist when you're adding zip and all of that, but since we're using elastic, we need the skirts to be able to go through either our head or from our hips above. So we'll be using our hips figure. Okay, so first thing we want to do is calculate the new waist, sorry, before the radius, and new waist in quotes because it's the hips we're using. So your hips figure plus 1 inch. Okay, that's just to add a bit more ease. By the time you use the elastic, it won't even show that you use your hips figure. Okay, so your hips figure plus 1 inch, and then you write that down. The next thing is to get our radius. Our radius is your new waist figure, which is your hips figure plus 1 inch, and then that total figure that you already have divided by 3.14. 3.14 is pi. It has to do with circles and calculations, but it's 3.14. When you're making a half circle skirt, what we're making now is a half circle skirt. Okay, so we're just cutting one piece. If you're making two pieces to get a full circle skirt, then you'll be using 6.28, but this is half circle skirt. Okay, and that one means you'll be cutting twice for each tier. This one we're cutting only once for each tier, so just two pieces. Okay, so my figure is 29 divided by 3.14, so that mine, I rounded it up to 9 1/4, 9.25. Okay, now to get our yardage, this is to help us to minimize waste, to know how to fold your fabric iron before cutting. You don't just want to fold and cut out and find out that you have some excess and you can't use it because, you know, it was cut on bias and all. So your yardage is your radius figure that you've already calculated plus your skirt length. Now remember that we are having two different skirt pieces here because it's a tiered skirt. So for example, my radius is 9.25 plus 21, which is the full length, would give me, that's the full length and that's the figure I'm using, would give me 30.25. So that's 30 1/4 inches is what I will be needing on my fabric to fold 2 times, and I'll be showing you shortly. And then the yardage for the second one is 9.25 plus 11, that's 20.25. So the length I'm folding for both of them is different, but it will help me save my fabric. Okay, so once you have all of these figures out, you're good to go. Now let's get to bring out our fabrics. You can use the same fabric. Okay, you can see mine here. You can use the same fabric for yours, or you can use 2 different fabrics. For me, I'm using 2 different fabrics. Okay, so if you're using 2 different fabrics, this is my first tier, as you can see here. Okay, that's the shorter one, and then this is the longer one. So I put the brighter one on top first. Now you can see that mine is already folded and ironed, so I want you to do the same thing. So for me, my yardage for the first one, the first tier, that's the shorter one, is 20.25, and let's just measure what I have here, and that gives me about 21.5. so I just added about 1 more inch to the yardage to give room for, in case if the edge of your fabric is not even, so that when you're cutting it, it does not affect you. Okay, so you can see that mine is folded. What I'll have after cutting will just be maybe ½ inch excess, unlike just folding randomly. Okay, now for the second one, my yardage is 9 1/4 plus 21 inches. That gives me 30 1/4, so it goes all the way down to about 31 inches. Okay, that's because that one is the longer part. All right, so I want you to fold yours, iron yours, and then after folding, pin it. You can see mine is pinned because we'll be doing a lot of move around. So pin yours so that when you're moving it around, it's not affected. Okay, and then of course have it ironed. So we'll be marking both on the first tier and the second tier. I just like them to place, I like to place both of them together so that we can get the waist part, which is of course our hips figure that we'll be using. Okay, that's our radius. So when you're done, place them together this way, except you're using the same fabric, then you want to cut one out first, then refold your fabric and cut the second one. But if you're using 2 different fabrics, you want to measure, let's measure our radius. The radius is the same thing for both of them. Okay, so our radius figure, whatever yours is, you want to go from the tip here. I have my cutting mat, let me just raise that up. Okay, so from the tip there, you want to measure what your radius will be. Like I said, mine is 9 1/4 because I'm doing this for a child. Okay, so whatever your figure is, we'll be taking in our allowance to attach the elastic from this figure, so no need to add ½ inch. If you are making a skirt and you want to add zip, you add, because taking in from this your figure means widening the waist figure, which is what the intention here is. So no need to add any half. So your figure, your radius figure is what we'll be using. So mark yours, making sure your tape is at the tip here, and then you mark all the way down. So you just keep rotating your tape and marking that your radius figure, making sure that your eyes are on the tip there, and you do that all the way down. Okay, so let's quickly have this marked. And then after marking, if it's different fabrics you're using, repeat the same step here. Why I place them together is because I want to cut both of them at the same time. I don't want any funny look at the end. Okay, but we will need that mark here, so let's quickly have this marked here. And then when you're done, you're going to almost repeat the same thing for here. Okay, so for here we don't really need all the round marking because this is placed on top, and we'll be using this one to cut, but you need your radius mark here. Okay, so let me just have my marked here at the edge here, and then at the edge here, because we would use it to measure our length. Okay, it's from this mark you measure your length on your second tier. Okay, and then from, where's my mark here, I'll measure my length all the way down. So you want to have that mark, but you don't need to mark round because this will be placed on top and then we'll cut, except it's the same fabric you're using. Then when you get to this, you mark round and you cut. Okay, so let's quickly have this marked round using our radius figure. Okay, so we have ours marked here, as you can see, and then the next step now is for us to mark our length. This is the first tier. Okay, that's the shorter one. So I'm going to come here, like I said, my length is 11 inches, and then I mark my 11 inches. Okay, my seam allowance has been added to this 11 inches. Now this figure here, what some people do is that they come to this and use this and mark, but it's more accurate when you start from the tip and you mark. Okay, so from this tip here, I measure. So from this tip here, I measure to where my mark is, and mine says 20.5. So is that 20.5? I will now take round, ensuring my tape is still at the tip here, and measure till I get to the edge. And you can see that where my 20.5 is, I just have, like I said, just 1 inch excess. Okay, so my material is not wasted. Okay, so the same way you mark this round, you want to come here and mark that round. Now when you're done with this, you can now take this just, you know, a bit off, or finally off, because this is bigger, and then you measure from this mark. My marker is blue so locating it is quite tricky. I'll just use this. Okay, and then you bring your measuring tape and you repeat the same. This is one of the easiest, coolest skirts to make for yourself, to do as mommy and me, or for just kids. Okay, so from this your mark, you come here and you measure what, let me just take it this way so you see, you measure what your length is. Like I said, mine is 21. Okay, and then you mark it, and then you come back to the tip, and then all the way to wherever your length is, and then you measure that round and mark. Okay, so that's why I said we don't need to mark all the way around, just the edge for the first, the radius, and then you use that to get your length, and then, like I said, the tip, and then you mark round. Okay, so I'm going to quickly have that done for both of them, and then we cut out our radius, then we cut out the length of this, which I'll be doing shortly, and then I flip this over and I cut out the length, because this waist would have already been cut out with this one here. Okay, and then what's left is to cut out the length part, which I have already marked. So let's quickly have all of that done that I have explained, and the next part will be for us to start sewing. Okay, so we're done cutting our 2 pieces. That's my full length piece, and this is my tiered piece. Looks really good. You can see that the waist aligned. Okay, so the next step now is you want to quickly clip the edges here. Okay, because they are going to serve for both pieces. They're going to serve as a guide when we are installing our elastic, so that everywhere is evenly sewed on. Okay, so just a piece of tape, and then you want to fold each one again, because we'll be marking our elastic in 4 places, and then you clip here just a little, so you have clips at the edge, at the side, front and back, and then this place is just as it is. Okay, and then repeat the same step for this. Fold equally and then clip. Now once you've done that, my fabric is folded on the wrong side, so I'm just going to head to the sewing machine and sew from bottom all the way top. Okay, to join the sides of each one. All right, and then do the same thing for the second tier. Sew from bottom to top, and then when we're done sewing, the next step would be for us to finish our hem. Okay, so after sewing, what you want to do is to fold your hem half an inch. You can use your measuring tape, especially for beginners, if you don't know how half an inch would be, or you want it to be very accurate. Me folding it, I already can tell that this is half an inch. Okay, so you want to take that to the ironing table. As you fold, you iron. Once you're done ironing, the half mark inch would be like this, so you have your right side facing your wrong side, and then we'll be taking this to the sewing machine, and this part here we will now fold into 2 to make it quarter of an inch. Okay, and we sew at the edge. So I'm going to just go on ahead. You want to do the same thing. Sew the sides like I said, fold this inwards using half an inch, and then iron, and then I'll take you to the sewing machine when I'm sewing this hem part, so that you too can go on with it. Okay, so now we have our two skirts pieces here. Remember to iron the hem of your skirts. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to baste the waist together so that it stays together. That's using temporary stitches on the waist until we add our elastic. Okay, so get your first tier to be on top of the second one, and mind you, there are some skirts that when you make them as tier, they use part lining and then the fabric if they don't have enough fabric, especially for the bigger tier. I'll do another tutorial on that some other time. Okay, so you make sure that your side seams match your side seam here, and then you pin and you take this to the sewing machine and you just baste round. That's using big stitches, okay, loose stitches, just round it to keep it in place, so that when we are attaching our elastic and stretching and all, you don't want to be doing all of that with your pin. And then you find the second edge. Remember we clipped it, so you should see your clipped mark there, and then pin and quickly pin all around, and then take it to the sewing machine and baste round. So let's do that. Now once you're done basting your waist, the fabric pieces, next thing you want to get is your elastic. I'm using black elastic. Okay, it usually looks more presentable than using white elastic. There are also waistbands where you can cut fabric and put the elastic in, but this tutorial has the elastic showing and it comes out looking really nice. So you want to take your waist measurement, your actual waist measurement. Now my own waist measurement for the baby I'm using is 23.5. So that's exactly what I'm going to measure. What I like to do is to stretch out the elastic. Okay, just stretch it out a bit before we cut out. Okay, and then I'm cutting out exactly the waist measurement. Why I'm cutting out exactly the waist measurement, you're advised to cut out a bit lower than that waist measurement, but I'll be using about 1 inch from it for the seam allowances, so I'm not adding any seam allowance to this. And also we have already stretched the elastic a bit, so it's a bit stretched out before we cut. So whatever your waist is, use that figure. When you're done making it and you feel, oh, I should reduce, then the next one you're making, you can take in 1 inch or so. But remember that it's passing through your hip, so you don't want it to be too tight. Okay, so that it doesn't now start snapping out and tearing. All right, so I'm quickly going to cut mine here at exactly the waist figure, 23.5. Okay, and then you join this together. I don't think there's a wrong or right side of elastic, and then you sew using 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, after you're sewing using 1/2, you can use your zigzag stitches if you have a tabletop machine that does that. I use an industrial, but just make sure you sew from top to bottom using 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then after sewing, you separate them each to each side, and then you understitch. Okay, that's making sure that they lay flat on the main elastic there. So you can see how I'm doing mine, so on each side and so on each side, so that it looks flat and it looks good. Okay, so at the end, the side with the allowance becomes the wrong side of our elastic, and then the other side becomes the right side of our elastic. Once you're done with this, you get out your skirt pieces, and let's attach this to the waist part. Okay, so we're done sewing. Like I said, this is the wrong side. As you can see, the sides were pressed down and sewn, okay, to keep it in place, and then this is the right side. So we're going to fold this equally using our main seam. Okay, the first seam, we sew them together. Fold that. Remember, this is the wrong side now. Okay, fold that like this so that you can get the other side of it, and then using your chalk, just mark that. Okay, you can either mark one end or the other end, but whatever end you're marking, that's the same place to be marking in other places. I'll show you. So I'm just going to put this like this, and then I'll mark here. Okay, so this is going to help us when we're attaching this to the outfit. So once you've done this, you also want to now fold again. Okay, and this is still you can see my mark here, so I'm going to come here and mark downwards again. Okay, and then this same for the other side of it here, and mark downwards again. So just be careful when you're marking so that they are all on the same wrong side of elastic. You can see my mark. So once you're done with this, get your skirt piece. You must have basted yours. You can see mine. Okay, and of course front side. So you get your seam area. Okay, this is my seam here, not so visible. And then you take your elastic. All right, so this part we marked is where we'll be pinning to the waist side. So you can see my wrong side here. So that's the right side of the elastic facing the right side of your fabric. So I'm going to take the seam, the main meat seam, to meet the seam here. Okay, you can see the back. That's the seam there. Okay, and then I pin it. So I like to pin the part that has less bulk. All right, and pin like this. And then this mark that you have here, the very first mark after your mid seam, you want to look for the very first clip after your seam on your fabric. So you can see mine. So I'm going to take the mark here. You see that the elastic is slightly smaller than this because of course the elastic is our waist size and the skirt is our hip size. Okay, so I pin that there. So when we're taking it to the machine, we'll just simply stretch it like this. Okay, yours may be more if you're sewing for your own size. So you continue doing that. Now that I've pinned that one, I look for the next clipped one here, which is this, and then my next mark on my elastic, and then I pin. And pretty much once we're done with this, we just need to understitch and then iron, and we're through. And then the last one, my mark here, I look for the clipped mark here, and then I pin. So taking this to the sewing machine, we'll be sewing one section at a time. So I like to pin everything at once. Okay, so this is how it looks. Let me put it this way. I'm on my sewing machine. Okay, so I'm going to start with my mid seam here. I'll start here, tack it, sewing using 1/2 of an inch. If you're using the bigger elastic, that's fine. It's still the same 1/2 of an inch you use, but you just have a bigger band when we're done sewing and you turn it up this way. Okay, so you start sewing from here, tack, and then once you put it in the sewing machine, you want to stretch where you've pinned, the next place you've pinned. If yours is more, stretch it more. Okay, because this is a child's on, it's pretty small here. And then when you get to this part, all right, you take out your pin, make sure your machine needle is inside, and then you hold the next area and then you stretch it. For me, what I like to do is if I'm using, like if I'm sewing for an adult and the distance here between this and this is quite long, I stretch it to get the mid part of the elastic on the fabric. Okay, so like how this is, I stretch it, then I just use my hand to part. So this is like the mid section. What I do is that I now pin this part here. I'm trying not to topple my camera recording. So I pin that part there. So from this part where my machine needle is still inside, I now stretch to the mid part of this section. Okay, and when I'm done here, I stretch again. All right, so you can have that done. If your distance is too wide, stretch it, get the mid part again, pin, and then when you get here, you look for the other end of the section, stretch, get the mid part, pin, and then stretch this part. So stretch this part, so until you get to the end here. Okay, so let's quickly have that done and then I'll show you mine. So this is how mine looks. Okay, already sewn. Now mind you, when sewing, sometimes your elastic can shift a bit beyond your waist, so you see that your waist is lower inwards. Don't bother. Okay, with time you get used to it. Even me, sometimes when I'm sewing, it just shifts, and then my waist, I see that it's only maybe 1/4 of an inch it captured. It's totally fine. With time you get it better and with more practice. So now that we have this, we want to make sure that our elastic sticks properly. Okay, like it stands this way, it's not always going this way. So we're going to be top stitching. Okay, I think I said under stitching earlier on, but it's actually top stitching. So you're going to get your elastic to face up. All right, and then we're taking this to the sewing machine. Now before we top stitch, I advise that you iron this. So you take this to your ironing board. I'm going to be doing that off camera. Stretch it and then just iron. Stretch it and iron. It makes it easier and it lays flatter before you top stitch. Okay, so let me quickly have that done and then we'll come and top stitch. So I'm done ironing. So you're going to take this to your sewing machine and you're going to be top stitching just at the edge, making sure that as you're sewing, you're putting this down, your fabric, so that it's not folded when you're top stitching. Okay, so you stretch it as you sew, putting this down, okay, until you come to the end, and then you tack again. You want to use a thread that is complementary to your fabric. Since I have orange here, it's orange, you can use orange. Well, I can use orange or white, so you make sure you use a proper thread. For the elastic, you can see that we use black for it, so change your thread, especially on top, okay, to match your fabric, and then top stitch to the end. Once you're done with that, that's the end of this tutorial. You want to just iron your fabric once again and then try it on, or whoever you're sewing for, you want to try it on. Okay, please send me pictures when you're done sewing and you try it on. I love to see your pictures. Send me pictures via Instagram, or you can send me an email, okay, or on TikTok you send a message there, and then I'll see you in the next video.